Dan Illman, Mike Beer, taking a look at race number 8 at Saratoga on Friday. It's the Shipman Handicap for New York breds. We're going a mile out of the chute, Mike. Have you noticed any trends at this mile distance thus far? Haven't been that many races.
There haven't been that many. It does feel like speed's been pretty important in these races. I think it seems like you want to be forward in these races. We'll see if that trend continues. As you mentioned, it's only been a handful of starts.
We will throw up the entry card for this race, and Bankit is a millionaire, and it's nice to see him back at the races at the age of 6. This will be his first start since the Grade 2 Godolphin Mile, where he was just in a little bit too tough. Now, he was ready to run in May, according to Dave Grenning's race advance for this race. For the commentator, a race he won in 2021. That race didn't fill. Then he displaced in a workout, so he's coming into this race off a bit of a layoff.
Yeah, it's a little bit of a layoff, and that's, I guess in most ways, that's just a real question as far as Bankit goes. As your morning line favorite, whether he's going to need one off this little bit of a breakdown, because I think it's pretty clear, even against a field like this one, which is pretty good overall, if Bankit runs his best race, he's probably a little too good for these horses.
We throw up the Timeform US pace projector for this race. Mike said speed seems to be doing well. Seafoam is a speed horse. The problem with Seafoam is we haven't seen him since New Year's Eve. And will he be ready off such a long layoff? And is he at his best at a mile? When he won this race last year, it was at a 1 1/8 miles.
Yeah, he's been a little bit better, going a little bit longer than this, but his speed will probably play in here if he comes back fresh off the break.
As for Bankit, he's the deserving favorite for Joel Rosario. Steve Asmussen breaking from the one post position. His win in the commentator over a wet track last year was super, super impressive. And then he ran just fine against Dr. Post in the Monmouth Cup, a race in which he made his big premature early move to the front and looked like a winner for a brief instant before tiring. They gave him a break after that start. His first race, I think they wanted him to run a little bit better, but the plan was the Godolphin Mile all along. And he had sort of like a 4-wide tracking trip there, and then they ran away from him in the stretch.
Yeah, I don't want to hold the Godolphin Mile against him. Listen, he's just a horse who, he's been very tough against New York breds. He's also more than held his own against open stakes horses along the way. He doesn't win a lot, but he wins his share of races. It's not a horse who has some kind of character flaw, I don't think, Dan. He tends to show up and run every time. He's got good tactical speed from the inside. There's just a lot to like about him in a race like this one, unless he's just not 100% tranked off the layoff.
The 2 Brooklyn Strong is a graded stakes winner. He won the Remsen going a 1 1/8 miles as a 2-year-old over a sloppy track, and that propelled him on the Triple Crown Trail, and he ran in the Kentucky Derby in 2021. The problem for Brooklyn Strong fans is he's yet to run back to that Remsen. It's nice to see him now run 3rd in a row without a break. He's had various injuries and layoffs plague his career, but I wonder if we're ever going to see that Remsen horse again.
Yeah, it seems like we're not going to. As you mentioned, he ran really well that day to become a Grade 2 winner, and he hasn't won a race since then. It's been an awful long time. He obviously didn't have much of a campaign as a 3-year-old, but he didn't really run well in any of those races. He's gotten back on track somewhat in his last 2 starts, Dan, but I'll tell you what, he better improve by a lot against this field. This is a good field.
The number 3, Three Jokers, earned a couple of stakes placings last year, including in this race when it was at a 1 1/8 miles when he finished second to Seafoam. Now, he's been competing in first-level open allowance races recently against some promising horses, Southern District being one of them. How do you argue against someone that says, I'm looking at his form, he ran a big number 2 starts back, but other than that, I'm a little underwhelmed?
If you're underwhelmed, you're underwhelmed. I can't help that. I feel like this horse is really, really underrated. I get that he hasn't won a race in over a year, Dan. It was last July, the last time he won. He's been second 5 times since then. He's run well in all of those races. I don't know. To me, nobody in this race benefits from the Evan Shipman being cut back to a mile than Three Jokers does. He doesn't want to go 9 furlongs. He's run well over 9 furlongs more than once, but he doesn't really want to go that far. He benefits from this race being a mile, and he's not overmatched by this field.
No, I think that's a great point. Turning back to a mile works for him. He has some tactical speed. He's coming into this race fresh for an excellent trainer in John Terranova. And you're right, he does have things. And if the track happens to be wet, you never know. At Saratoga, this horse likes that just fine. The 4 is Therisastormbrewin. He was second in the Saginaw behind Market Alert, who's also in this race. This horse has shown speed in the past, and maybe he'll try to throw a wrench in the works to the 7 Seafoam. He draws inside. He has speed. Maybe he's a horse that's on ascend.
Yeah, I think he is going to go in this race. We'll see if it works out for him because it feels like he's going to go, and there are going to be other good horses up there with him, which was kind of the case in the Saginaw last time. He went the favorite in that race. Also, listen to your heart. He also went to the lead in there, and Therisastormbrewin got the better of that horse. He just couldn't really hold on at the end. He was no match for Market Alert. I thought he ran fine, Dan. To me, he's a horse who needs to run the very best race of his career to even get a piece of this thing. This is another one. He's just in a really tough spot here.
Gets an aggressive jockey in Luis Saez. Rudy Rodriguez snake bit. We know he's much better than his record at this meet. He is overdue. The 5 is Tiergan. He's won at a mile at Saratoga, so he handles the configuration. Irad gave him a nice ride last time out. He was able to kind of save ground in the early portion. He got to the outside on the turn. Once he made the lead after winning horses, it's all over but the shouting. This is Tiergan in a $45,000 optional claimer earlier this meet. He wins by 10. He wins with a 96 Beyer speed figure. He's claimed out of this race by Bill Morey, who's a sharp trainer.
Yeah, he is just ridden out against an overmatched field here. He was 3-5. I think that's worth pointing out. A horse who didn't get a great trip 2 starts back when he just fell short of a front-running winner. He obviously made some amends there and was claimed. A horse that's easy to make a case for, Dan. This is a pretty significant step up in class for this horse. I do think he can handle it, though. And he's another one. I think the mile, shorter is better for this horse. He's run well at a mile and an eighth. The mile works much better for him in this race.
Market Alert, the 6, scored in the Saginaw last time out, and we're going to take a look at that race. I think this horse tripped out very nicely under Jose Ortiz. The pace was solid, and he was able to settle in mid-pack early while the front runners just sort of banged heads. He got to the outside, and he's going to wear down the leaders and draw out the last 16th.
Yeah, and just a good performance. He did sit a really nice trip, but he got on top of these leaders pretty readily around the turn, and he, sort of edges away at the end to a convincing win. And a nice performance for this horse, who's been in good form for a really long time, and he might fall into another trip here, Dan. He's going to be a very fair price if you like him right back.
Seafoam was claimed by these very sharp connections for $45,000 at Saratoga last year. And other than trying the Greenwood Cup at a mile and a half, which is likely too far, and other than facing American Revolution in the Empire Classic, that horse, of course, won the Grade 1 Cigar Mile later in the year. He's done nothing wrong. He won the Alex and Rob on New Year's Eve, going a mile and an eighth on a wet track. He showed his usual girly speed. I thought this was a legitimate pace he set, and he just found more every time.
Yeah, he's a nice horse, and he's double tough when he's able to make the early lead in his races, and it seems like there's a real possibility of that happening in this race on Friday, Dan. He's one of the horses, we've talked about a couple of horses who benefit from this race being cut back to a mile. I don't think it helps Seafoam, even though, he could make the lead here and it'll help him. He really likes Saratoga, but all 4 of those wins at Saratoga are the 2-turn mile and an eighth route races. Those races he really likes. The other thing that I think you have to really concern yourself with him, and he's a really good horse, but he's never been good off of layoffs. He was terrible off the layoff last year in the Commentator. The year before that in 2020, he got beat 30 lengths in his first start off the layoff, and he came back and won his second start. Same thing the year before that in 2019. No good off the layoff, 1 second time back. His history's been that he needs one off the bench.
He has been in good form before the layoff. Danny California, the horse we saw rally for second, returned to earn a 95 Beyer in his subsequent start. This is a fun race because of the change in distance, because of the possibility that maybe the pace projector is wrong and that a horse can go after Seafoam in the early stages and maybe set things up for other horses. That would be Therisastormbrewin. Let's take a look at our top picks for this race. All of your points about Seafoam are understood, and they make perfect sense. I just think when he's right, he's very good. And I like to get him right to the front in this race. I'm hoping the pace projector is right. I think he can take them gate to wire. 3 jokers, though, I think the price is going to be just right for him.
Yeah, that's why I took him. I think he's going to, I know he's going to be a good price in this race. And again, I just personally don't think he's overmatched by this field. It's not going to be easy for him to win. If Seafoam's ready off the layoff and if Bankett's ready off the layoff, 3 jokers probably can't beat them, but he can certainly get a piece of this. He's going to fall into a trip in this race, and I just want to bet him at a price.
Millionaire Bankett, the horse to beat in the Evan Shipman. We'll try to beat him. 3157 for Mike, 7516 for me. Best of luck.